Imagine human language suddenly disappeared from the earth. What's left is not silence, it's something far stranger. It's the song of birds before sunrise and the warning call of the deer hidden deep within a forest, and a pod of whales communicating across hundreds of kilometers. Your own dog quietly looking towards you without making a sound, and yet somehow telling you exactly what he needs. For thousands of years, human beings have assumed language belongs primarily to us. The ancient Egyptians never believed that. And what they understood instead is maybe the thing our civilization most needs to remember. They observed nature with extraordinary patience, and what they discovered led them to a different conclusion. They believed that communication is one of the fundamental principles of creation itself. Long before words existed, life was already speaking, not through grammar and not through vocabulary, but through relationship. Today, we often describe animals as instinctive creatures, reacting automatically to the world around them. The Egyptian view was very different. Animals were understood as expressions of intelligence, each participating in the living order of creation in a unique way. They were not lesser and they were not greater. They were different. Every species carrying its own form of wisdom, and every species participating in an invisible conversation that has continued for millions of years. And perhaps that sounds poetic, yet modern biology continues discovering examples that become increasingly difficult to dismiss. Trees exchanging chemical information through underground fungal networks, whales coordinating across enormous distances, elephants warning one another about danger beyond the limits of human hearing, and birds changing direction almost simultaneously as through responding to something they shared rather than something they see. The more closely we observe nature, the more communication appears everywhere. And it's not human communication, life communicating with itself. And perhaps that is where we should begin asking a different question. Not whether animals communicate. That has become increasingly obvious. The real question is why human beings become convinced that we no longer participate in that conversation ourselves. The ancient Egyptians described the harmony of creation through a single principle. And many people translate Maat as this principle, as truth or balance or order. All of these translations are correct, yet none of them fully captures what the Egyptians really meant. Maat is the right relationship, it's the right order, the relationship between heaven and earth, between thought and action, between human beings, and equally between humanity and every other living expression of creation. None of us exists in isolation, and everything influences everything else. And once you begin looking at nature through that idea, something remarkable becomes visible. Animals react rarely alone, not because they are dependent, because life itself functions through relationship. We have the bees and the flowers, and the trees and the fungi, and the coral and the algae, and the predators and the prey. Each appears separate at first, yet each continually exchanges information with others. The Egyptians recognized this. thousands of years before ecology became a scientific discipline or idea. Life survives because it communicates, not because it competes. Communication is one of the invisible forces that continuously restores balance. And this is where the modern human being occupies a curious position. We have become extraordinary skilled at speaking, yet we may have become less capable of listening. We enter a forest and we wear headphones. We walk our dogs and we are reading our phones. We move through the living world surrounded by information, yet increasingly disconnect from the intelligence present around us. Animals they have never abandoned this intelligence. They continue responding to subtle changes in weather long before we notice it. They sense earthquakes before we have the detection through scientific instruments. And many find their way across continents without maps, not because they possess supernatural powers, but because they remain deeply connected to the living systems of which they are part. Perhaps the greatest difference between us and them, the animals, is not intelligence. Perhaps it is attention. Animals, they remain attentive. Human beings often remain distracted. The Egyptian tradition suggested that life is held together through relationship. Let's not forget that. Communication exists long before human language, and every species continues participating in that conversation, whether we recognize it or not. Which now raises another question. If that conversation is still taking place, is it possible for us to remember how to hear again? I believe this may become one of the most important questions of our time, not only because of animals, because of ourselves. Humanity has achieved extraordinary things through science and to our technology. Yet many people I meet quietly carry a feeling of something essential that has been lost. We know more than any generation before us, and yet many of us feel profoundly disconnected from the living world. We feel alone, and perhaps knowledge alone cannot restore what relationship once provided. The Egyptians never placed humanity above nature nor beneath it. They placed us humans within it. We were never meant to become observers standing outside creation. We were always participants. This changes the way we see every animal that enters our lives. A dog becomes more than a companion. A bird becomes more than a background sound when we're in the forest. A horse becomes more than transportation, hopefully. Each becomes another expression of the same living intelligence that gave rise to us. The question is no longer whether animals possess consciousness. The better question is whether consciousness itself has always been shared between human and animals. Perhaps the future of humanity does not depend on technology. Perhaps it depends on us rediscovering our far older ability. The ability to enter into the right relationship with the living world once again. The Egyptians called this concept Mat not as an abstract philosophy, not as religious belief, a way of living that recognized every action, every thought, and every relationship as part of a greater harmony. Perhaps that is why so many ancient temples were filled with animal forms. Not because Egyptians worshipped animals, but because they recognized them as teachers, teachers of attention and teachers of balance and teachers of relationship. Today we rarely ask what the natural world might be still trying to teach us. Maybe it has never stopped speaking, and maybe it is we who have forgotten how to listen. And perhaps remembering that conversation is not only important for our own spiritual development, but for the future of this planet itself. Because a civilization that no longer understands the language of life eventually loses its relationship with life itself. And next week, exactly fitting to this, we will discuss how almost every great tradition believes that consciousness itself exists beyond the individual mind and how we are all connected through that. So the next time when you go outside, leave your headphones behind and maybe put your phone in your pocket and look around you and start listening again. I'm Nicky Sabeti. If you like this kind of content, please subscribe and like my channel. And thank you for spending time with me. I see you in the next episode.